the socio-economic status in this country. So let's move on. So in terms of disability, we have a disability prevalence of around 15%, which translates to that number, and more than 50% they are women. And what is concerning about these statistics is that UN estimates, they estimate that by 2050, this data is likely to increase by 10% if 10 measures are not taken. So we need to, in terms of children, as you can see, around 4.8 million of our 6.3 million children, they live in poverty. Around 1.6 million of them, they live in extreme poverty. So these are different measures of poverty. Over 200,000 have turned into vending for survival. Kana wakauya uchibva maybe nekwanda kavona ko kuHarare uko wakambosangana nevana vaitokumbira parod. So then we have nutrition and health inputs as critical issues that we must take care of as a nation in the early phases of the development of a child. And in the latter phases, we talk about enrollment and retention in school becoming the critical factors. So here I'm trying to just give some aspects of health and education there. In terms of infant education, we have the lowest number of qualified teachers, 57%, highest qualified teacher-pupil ratio, lowest net enrollment ratio, and all that data. Next. And what about the commitments that we have made we as a country, the government, yes, but we are saying we want to support 1.5 million children through BEAM and the other facilities like granting aid tuition. In 2022, there was the introduction of state-funded basic education with priority given to rural schools. But next. But not much in terms of traction. In terms of the situational analysis on the ground, we have a high demand and low supply, and this is largely because of structural challenges, low financing, human capital base, and more than 1.5 million children require BEAM support. And more importantly, when it comes to infrastructure, we have a deficit of around 2,953 schools that we require as a country. And the government committed to recruit an additional 7,000 teachers. And I read in some newspapers during the course of this year that 4,600 teachers have already been recruited. So I think that's positive, but I think we need to take note of those statistics. Then in terms of utilization, expenditure tracking, so I put this because so the blue one, that's employment, costs, my salary. The orange one, that's goods and services. The gray one, that's capital expenditure. So I put that because as you can see from the graphs, the utilization on capital expenditure has been generally low. There is no full utilization on capital expenditure, and yet in the slide below we saw that we actually have a deficit of 2,953 schools. In terms of the Dakar Declaration, we are falling short as well, but so this data is for primary and secondary education. If you combine with the higher and tertiary education, it becomes 17.8%. Next. In terms of the context of our young people, 58% of our young people, of our population is it's young people, and 56% of the 58%, they are in rural areas, and the 40% are in urban areas. Next. Okay. So in terms of so you can see from the data, I will skip in the interest of time, but from the data generally, you can see that our young people, most of them, they are not economically empowered. So I think in our discussions, because we are talking about debt issues, so I haven't heard, maybe I missed it, discussions around, you know, intergenerational planning. That's why I'm bringing these statistics. What does this mean for our young people? Because this is the current statistics. If we don't address these issues, so what does it mean for our young people in the future? I'm just trying to put the context why I try to bring some of this data to your attention. So Zimbabwe is in terms of the scores on the Youth Development Index, we are somewhere here. So there are various indicators there, but you can go to the slide for further references. But our challenges on our young people, you see that they are mostly related to economic issues, lack of employment, income generating projects, and also health related issues, drug and substance abuse. So, next. And also priorities, they are also centered around vocational training, income generating activities, and employment creation. So as we discuss, we need to understand, so how does our current debt status translate into all these kinds of data. So then this is also an overview of the national budget distribution in terms of youth development, youth empowerment development and vocational training, and also that's the dark blue, and the light blue, the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology. So I put this because for me, sometimes how we then also utilize the few resources that we have does not match the needs. So this is just a picture to show you that, like in this case, vocational training, in my own thinking, I think it should have a bigger budget than higher and tertiary education, so that the people are skilled. Because if we are thinking at an intergenerational perspective, then these people, if they don't have skills, it means even in future we are also not going to have resources, which will then, you know, the transmission effect to that, I think it's ongoing. In the interest of time, I will not go into all those details. But I think how we also structure our current budgets, that's the context. How we structure our current budgets, our current national budgets, I think it's also very critical in improving some of these things. Then also, as we look into the audit report, I put this just to put it at the back of our minds. As we look into the audit reports, you will see that there are so many issues related to some of these pillars: the physical infrastructure, the deficiencies in physical infrastructure, staffing infrastructure, physical digital infrastructure, legal infrastructure, financial infrastructure. So how do we seek to address some of these things? Because if we don't address some of these things, then it will have a ripple effect in terms of our capacity, even to service debt in future. Okay. You can skip. You can skip. Yeah. Let's go to the skip. Let's go to the audit report. Ooh. Okay. So in terms of health, I think next. In terms of health, again, in Zimbabwe, we now have a double challenge of both communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. So these are some of the critical issues that I think we need to, because the whole point, why I'm trying to answer the question, why do we want to address this dirty issue? To what end? We want to make sure that there is inclusive, sustainable development, right? So when we have that, then some of these indicators that I'm highlighting, at the end of the day, they must improve. So I'm bringing this picture so that we understand why we need to address the debt issue. That's the whole point here. So you can see, even in terms of budget allocations towards health, the Abuja Declaration, we only met it in 2021. My suspicion is that it was because of the SDRs. I haven't heard any discussion around that, but that's another issue again that I think, was part of the SDRs used towards servicing debt? Why not? How much? Things like that. Okay, before. Then this one, it also gives the various benchmarks that we need. So there are various moderate scenarios. This one is the lowest level, the orange one. Then the mid one is the moderate scenario. So this is the income per capita that we need as a country to have health that is considered to be pro-development. When we talk about middle income status, there are benchmarks there. So in the target is the orange one at top, the $104. But for now, the government has agreed to say, okay, let's target around $86 per capita, which is the moderate scenario. But these are have been the allocations from 2016 to 2023. So next. Then public funding towards health. Blue is the domestic. Orange is the external. Overseas development assistance. So that you understand, part of that funding by disease area, HIV, the other two one, the first one, that's HIV. The other two one, that's COVID-19. So COVID-19 ndo yatakati ma SDRs. So iyo HIV ndo kuri kuenda ma overseas development assistance akawanda. So it means domestically our funding towards health. In other discussions, they were highlighting issues to do with inflation. I think macroeconomic stability. Next. Okay. So as I close this, generally what we can see here is that in terms of health, the funding gap is increasing over time. 2021, we had a funding gap of 61 million. In 2022, 297 million, 290 million. So it's increasing the funding gap. So in the context of our discussion, it means my issues acho atufana kunge tichigadzirisa ari kuwanda, because all these gaps again, they also will need our attention. So now I'm going into the OAG findings, but I wanted to paint a picture of why we are doing what we are doing, so that we get an appreciation. So our macroeconomic context, basically, we understand, or I think there's need to appreciate that, of course, there are competing interests vis-a-vis a constrained fiscal space. We have a thin tax base, I think yabatwa nyaya iyoyo, largely due to the fact that our country is highly informalized. Our taxes are regressive in nature. We also have limited long-term financing options, which is why we are having some of these discussions. And we also had unstable exchange rates and inflation, which then complicates the planning and modeling process in the macroeconomic framework until ZIG. I had to put that caveat so that but that was the context. You can skip. You can skip. Okay, so in terms of the OAG report, there are various supporting legislation which I will not talk about. But what is the mandate generally of the Office of the Auditor General? It is to audit all. The mandate is clear that all must be audited. All departments, institutions, and agencies. That one must be clear. So, apana zvekuti ava very special or vazoita say, but is it what is happening on the ground? Why is it that some ministries, departments, agencies, they are not being audited? So it becomes an issue. At the request of the government, the office can also carry out special audits. For example, I think I don't know if that was done or it skipped me, but I think on the issue of SDRs, there is need for special audits on that to ensure that receipts and disbursements are made under proper authority and are correctly accounted for. Because if there is no accountability, then even this discussion that we are having, I don't think it will amount to anything. There must also be value for money in that process. So what is the value of that report? To ensure and instill fiscal discipline. I think that was highlighted both in terms of revenue generation and also in terms of expenditures. Here we are talking about issues of debt. Was there discipline when the debt was contracted? I think that question was raised. And was there discipline on the utilization of the money that was then gotten? Operational efficiency and accountability, among others. So in terms of local authorities, only 19 of the 92 local authorities had updated financial statements as of 2023. Only 19. So it comes back to the 5 pillars that I spoke to earlier on. Is it a staffing infrastructure issue? Is it a physical digital infrastructure issue? Because some of the operations are manual. What is it? So these are things that we need to also understand. Yes, the statistics might not look good, but I think we need to go deeper and understand why is it that those who cannot update their financials are facing such challenges. 60% of the opinions were adverse and only 2 were clean. 71% of the 533 audit findings were unaddressed. My findings akamboitwa muna 2022 pakapuwa ma recommendations zvikanzi itai zvekuti they were not addressed again in the subsequent cycle. So the question now becomes, what is the issue? Is it an issue of there is no capacity? Is it an issue there is no will? What is the issue? Because if we don't answer some of these questions, I think it will become difficult even in our debt discussion to also find sustainable solutions. Many local authorities, they are diverting devolution funds from the intended use. So that's a physical discipline issue. There are so many irregularities related to internal controls, inventory cash management, among others. Next. There are also accountability gaps. 81% of the findings cover revenue collection and debt recovery. There are accountability gaps related to procurement. There are accountability gaps related to asset management, and also service delivery. Unsupported salary arrears, unauthorized allowances and benefits. So there are accountability gap issues as well in the report. Next. So what are the implications of this in terms of health, education and social protection? Local authorities, they control 65% of total schools in Zimbabwe. With the rural district councils having the majority, the bulk 63%. So if we have all these issues, then that will also have an effect on in terms of quality education. Poor and inadequate infrastructure, education infrastructure here complicates access and quality. For example, Chikomba Rural District Council had 12 instead of 28 classrooms to cover 961 students. In Gokwe, over 82% of schools require renovations. I think the issue of the infrastructure deficits, which is around 3,000, I've highlighted, I've spoken to that. So these are some of the implications which I think if we have proper, internal controls, and then we can improve some of these indicators, and that will then translate into a better quality education, universal access to healthcare according to section 67. But there are some district councils, they do not have licenses. Well, we are in Kadoma. Maybe you can confirm whether this status has changed or not. Our hosts in Chivi, no ambulance again. In Mtare, some clinics are not registered. What is the implication? No access to drugs. So most local authorities, they fail to provide water. We were talking over lunch with someone. I told you, all right, I can buy jambi, Baba. I can buy jambi. But mukaona pese pachiri kutaurwa nezvekolera. Kolera chirwere chakudhara chaiko chaiko. Chakudhara chaiko, kune vanokaita zvehistory of medicine vanokuudzai kuti zvirwere izvi zvana typhoid nana kolera ndezvakudhara. Ende zvakasolvwa, zvinotombosovwa nemapirizi, nengonzi vanhu ngavazive pekudisposera tsvina nekugona kushandisa mvura chete. Ndo masolutions akatodiscoverwa kudhara, zvemapirizi zvisati zvatombovepo izvi. Saka mukaona tichiri kutaura neizvozvi zvikureva kuti mvura kana isipo, we talk about unpaid care and domestic work, which also perpetuate inequalities. Clean environments. Then in terms of state-owned enterprises and parastatals, so there are issues again related to governance, revenue collection, management of assets. But what is most glaring there in terms of the reports is that governance issues, they are increasing over time. Though saka zvinhu zvinechekuita ne, maybe in a way to some extent, I think the will of us, do we really want to provide the services? Do we want to be efficient and everything? So for example, there were 170 governance issues in 2022 and now 310 in 2023, almost doubled. Aparufana ngachidzika. So what does that say about us, about our culture, about our attitude? I don't know. But so all these issues, I think they need attention. So there are issues to do with I think I've highlighted that. They can next. Out of 35 ministries and commissions, 30 submitted their IPSAS for audit review, while 5 did not submit. The question is 5 vacho ndivanani? Ina handisi pano kutaura mazita, handizivi kuti, but I think none of the ministries and commissions had implemented the 2023 planned activities in total. So overall, of the 80 financial statements audited, 49 had clean opinions, 34 qualified, 6 had adverse, and 11% disclaimer. Next. Next. So this graph is just showing that table yatambo taura nezva AI. Next. I think let's go to the recommendations. Okay, just a slide before. All right. So here I just put this for interest sake also. I just put this for interest sake to say, I think I don't know, but I think there are a lot of questions that we might need to ask ourselves. Here we are talking about the 2023 audit report Nenya Dzirimo and all that, which speaks to issues of physical discipline, governance and what. But 2024, pane zvimwe zvandiri kungoonawo zviri kuitika. There are some things that I'm just observing, which I think, very interesting. For example, we had the El Nino in our ndikuda kuti tione kuti sometimes panobudira zvikwereti zvacho kuplanning chaiko ne implementation, allocation implementation. We had El Nino as part of our budget assumptions, right? But hakuna mari yakanyatsosetwa aside to cover for that. And then now El Nino yazonyatsouya zvemashuwa. We now declared a state of emergency. But declare futi state of emergency pa issue yataka ndikuda ngozama kutaura kuti panogona kutoita chimwe chikwereti chinogona kutobuda futi ipapa tine zvimwe zvatoda kudhila nazvo. Declare state of emergency pa chinhu chatiri kuziva kuti chiri kuuya, tiri kuziva because chiri mumabudget assumptions. Ndo patarega kuisa mari ipapo. After that, now SADC appealed for 5.5 billion, right, to cover 61 million people. Isusu senyika tiri 3 billion. So to me meti dzacho dziri kundivhiringa futi kuti tikave vanhu 7.7 million, SADC iri kuda 5 billion. So there are two sides of the coin to this. Either the figures were inflated, or this El Nino thing was a well-known thing, right? Which other countries had planned for. So they do not need as much resources as Isusu, because although we were aware of it, we did not plan for it. Saka rubatsiro rurukasauya kureva kuti panogona kubuda futi chimwe chikwereti apa. Iyi haimo muripoti, ndiringotaura ungoti. So this is the context. What is the implication on that? Kana vanhu vaine nzara, this is a state of emergency. There is increased health and education financing burden, sustainability issues. We are in agro-based economy, and more than 70% of our farmers, they are smallholder farmers, and kana kukaita drought, the shock is massive. We don't even want to talk about declining commodity prices. So my point is panogona futi kubuda chimwe chikwereti papa chaigona kunge chaka. Okay, recommendations. So the recommendations is why don't we have or be serious in terms of my performance contracts. I think that issue also needs to be discussed. Of course, here in the context of OAG report, but even in terms of Nyaze debt, why don't we also discuss about Nyaze my performance contract? Local authorities must ensure that they implement my recommendations so that they restore their public trust. The social contract at the moment is broken. Formulation which is derived from genuine public consultations, not cosmetic, and implementation of key policy guidelines. Physical digital infrastructure to minimize leakages. I think it's intentional kuti zvinhu zvakawanda zviri manual. Because kana zviri manual panoita leakages are easy. Digital footprint iya yambotaurwa yaya. Next. So there are also recommendations related to the appropriations account. Next. For example, aligning of the PFM Act with the other legal frameworks. I think it was highlighted here. On state-owned enterprises, I think the parliament should be more involved in the appointment of persons to boards, ensuring that corporate executives they are held accountable, need for demonstrated political will, among others. Next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pasara. Another round of applause for him, please. So I've asked him to remain here. Don't run away from us just yet. I'm sure there are some questions and clarifications. You presented a lot of statistics on health, on education, and on youth. And I can see that there are a lot of youthful faces and youthful people in the room. So, yeah, and interestingly enough, during lunch, I saw a Kadoma City ambulance just outside. So perhaps we can get clarity on what exactly is the figure in terms of the ambulances in the city. And as the youth say, numbers don't lie. So I think when you were showing us the statistics, it was beginning to create a clearer image in our minds in terms of what really are these socioeconomic implications that this has on us. So with that being said, I'm going to take a round of questions. I'm going to take 3 questions. That's fine. I'm going to take 3 questions. Questions, clarifications, or comments. I kindly ask that these questions, clarifications, and comments are short like me. So please keep them very, very short. Okay, I'll take a hand from here, Admire, Claudette, and Honorable Wende. I'll just wait for Dr. Pasara to come back, and we'll take the first round of questions. Unfortunately, we don't have a roving mic anymore. Our mic is wired, so I cannot move it. So please, can you just make sure you project your voice when you make your contributions? Thank you.
My quick question, quick report, it's we have figures as in revenue losses as a result of the findings that we just presented, and what's the quantum of those revenue losses?
We can have the next question.
Thank you. My question is, you say that government intends to support approximately 1.5 million children through, but from my understanding, there are complaints that the government can spend 2 years without paying the fees, but still want to increase the number. Why? And secondly, you mentioned about the food secure. So, but you say you want to use those food people in rural areas. But what I can say is that you will not be giving us that food. We are waiting for that food, because that food, when it comes there, they say it's food for work. So as I talk right now on Monday, we are going for the meeting for that food. And if you are willing to go and work, you are going to be in for that project. But if you can't work, it means you are not in for the money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mine is just a question that I asked.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, a disclaimer. I'm not representing the Office of the Auditor General. I'm from the University of Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Very good report.
Oh, okay.
Yes, well, it's part of the work that we are doing in Parliament. That's what is clarified. I think all the shocking statistics around the recommendations that were not implemented. I think the biggest challenge that we faced is that because of the backlog from 2020, up to now we haven't even started analyzing the 2023 reports, because we're still busy doing the 21 and the 2022 reports because of those reports. So we take a decision yesterday as Parliament to say that we abandon that way, then we try to combine all the reports so that we are current. So the problem is that Parliament is the one that is supposed to help the Auditor General ensuring that the recommendations are implemented. So when there's that huge backlog, by the time that we finish, if we follow that timetable, by the time that we finish the 2022 report, the 2024 already will be out, So we are now just hoping that with us now focusing on the 2023 report, we hope that we will have better statistics in the next report, because we are already in September. And by June, the 2024 report will be out. So we'll try to also, as much as possible, sit down with the work. So that's minor clarification.
Okay, all right, yeah, thank you. Yeah, in terms of the quantum of the revenue loss, that one, it's not there in my understanding, but I think there is a good reason for that, because the value for money principle is also, number one, it's subjective, and number two, there are a lot of factors that must then be factored into account. For example, we are talking about probably the 2021 report, 2022 report, 2023 report, right? Then we must then factor in inflation to come up with a correct estimate of the real value of the money that was lost. So I don't know if I'm answering, but I think in terms of the actual quantity, the quantum of the figure, it becomes a complex process to aggregate it. That's my thinking. But it can be done, but I think separately. I think it will need a separate research work to do that, so that you can actually, try to estimate, a figure that make economic sense, because there are then so many factors that you then have to factor in. Because part of the challenge actually that has been happening at procurement level is that sometimes a department will say they want to procure 20 vehicles, and then, but by the time they are able to make a payment, when the payment is actually approved, that money can only buy probably 8 vehicles, right? But the money that was approved was, and the other portion was just eaten by inflation. So these are some of the issues. So I don't know if you get the complexities involved in then estimating the actual quantum of the revenue loss. I think it will need a separate study from this report. What the report does is to just highlight that this might need further investigation. This might need further research. This might need further clarification. But at the time the data was collected, there was no ambulance, for example. But probably when you then go, maybe when the committee now is now, you know, doing the reviews, maybe now it's there, it has been procured. So those are some of the complexities that then happens. So it becomes.
That's maybe on the cards. I think apart from the issue of inflation, but there's a number of suppliers that were even given US dollars, but still failed to supply. And they become so innovative when I was with Reza. Even Zach, they were victims also of those gas
Yeah. So I think your question in it's something that we need further probing to then actually come up with maybe a better informed position. In short, 1.5 million children through BIM. Why increase the number when you cannot service? Okay, when I was just rushing through the slides, maybe you can just go back a little bit. Just go back. Just go back. You see in red there, underutilized funds. A total of 10.3 billion was allocated towards the well-being of vulnerable groups, older persons, BIM, etc. However, the funds were not utilized due to the absence of an effective mechanism to identify beneficiaries. So, but that was the reason that was given to the what? Auditor. That's why I got Europe. So those are some of the inconsistencies. I'm just supporting your point. Those are some of the inconsistencies that we then need to say. So if we have effective performance contracts, then I think someone should be accountable based on that. Right? That's my thinking. That's my thinking. Because my resources are where you are saying, yes, honorable.
Thank you so much for the follow-up question on the issue of BIM. Yes, the government is doing quite a lot in availing infants for vulnerable children. But my worry is on the number of children, let me say children of school-going age who are out of school, right? In the education system, we also have a policy which says no child should be excluded from school on the basis of non-payment of fees. Now we have got a huge number of school-going children who are out of school. What mechanism can be put in place to ensure that every child of school-going age is in school?
Okay. Yes. So that's a good question. Maybe I'll just quickly respond before I forget my answer. Then I'll come to you, Tafat. So I think I had it in my recommendations, but someone also, I forgot who earlier on mentioned it, that government, I think it was from the Public Debt Management Office. Government is in the process of establishing a single social register, right? So I think that's one of the ways, because right now part of the challenge is that we do not have a consolidated database. right? So it becomes a challenge. You find out that in other cases, we actually have duplication of beneficiaries. Grant in aid tuition, benefita, BMO benefita, but they actually have zero. So if we have a consolidated social registry that then identifies all these demographic indicators, disability, low income, and what, I think it becomes easier now when it comes to implementation. But in silos, that's where sometimes some of the issues come up. Okay, many hands are coming down.
I'm going to take 2 hands. So I'll take Tafadzwa and Nyasha at the back there. Okay, I'm getting a step from today. Okay, I'll take the last 3 hands. Remember that the conversation is continuing, so we can continue even after he's off the stand. We'll continue to have these conversations. So I'll take the last 3 hands. Short and sweet, please, and thank you.
Thanks. So thanks for the presentation. My issue is around the young people and their considerations in issues around it, especially for the ministry. The young people, in terms of production, we have a time when you are producing more than you're consuming, and that's when you're young, and then possibly when you're then old. So the idea for us now as young people would then be, when you're taking this debt on, are you borrowing to be able to increase your tax base by investing in the young people who are able to actually produce more now than they are consuming? And is your debt strategy to then clear it also considering the young people, especially considering that over 68% of this country is under 35 years of age? What is the ministry doing in terms of engaging the young people in this, not just in this discussion, but in terms of the actual strategies that are there, considering that a lot of them are not paying taxes? So the logic for us would then be, let's borrow to invest in this group so that we can actually widen the tax base. But is that happening, or we are borrowing to spend on projects that are not actually going to benefit the potential taxpayers we expect to help us pay to repay these debts?
Thank you. Nyasha, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for such a beautiful presentation, Doc. Even my questions, my comments, my recommendations. So nchatanga kuna honorable Wende. Kana chitiri kuna 2021, tisitiri kuresa here. If my memory serves me well, I've been in this room, this very same room. This is my 3rd time discussing the Auditor General's report findings with the Public Accounts Committee, in particular on different issues. And we have discussed a number of issues that we thought by now PAC could have taken them up to Parliament. One of them, it involves issue mazino chayo kwa Auditor General. Constitution is very clear, Section 309 of the Constitution, which says public entities must comply with orders that are given to them by the Auditor General to rectify issues that would have come from the audit. That is very clear in terms of Section 309 of the Constitution. But when you go to the Office Audit Act, Amuna, that provision which operationalizes that section of the Constitution to give the Office of the Auditor General the powers to also penalize non-implementers of the recommendations. So that has not been taken up. I think we've waited. I think this is the 3rd year now, still discussing the same issues, because now Chikatias are 533 issues that were not implemented from the previous recommendation. That's a high number. But why is it happening? We had an interrogation that we did, and that was disseminated in this very same room in 2022, which established that the senior accounting officers of MDAs they do not take the audit function seriously. Yet they do not even attend the audit exit meetings when they're supposed to iron out some of these issues. If you remember, Zakapudama Manje, I think it's the Honorable Deputy Minister of Finance, saying that the Office of the Auditor General urged to say these cars were not delivered. But they did not iron those issues out because I'm sure they did not attend the audit exit meetings. So that function will not be taken seriously as long as there are no penalties. So we need to make sure that the Office Audit Act is also amended to that effect. And then going back to my performance contract, I also think that we have done a good thing about instituting my performance contract. But what we have not done is to make sure that we reward clean audits with other contracts. We have not seen anyone who has been punished for not having a clean audit. So I think those are some of the things that also needs to be put in place. Thank you.
Thank you. The last time from
Yeah, 19 out of 92 did update, no penalties. I think that's enough. What about you? Also, at this result, now you know the climate justice. I'm talking about the deputy secretary of Mamachita, but Cyclone Idai, Yakati, it's actually so hard and harsh. Now El Nino is coming, being too harsh again. We don't have funds for that, but we have got the national budget. We are not planning anything about it. We are only talking about it here. We are not implementing anything. We are not pushing for anything. We are not quality. And also, quality church. How sure are we that the victims get this help? Not me, who is not a victim, which one has been. How are we going to make that thing be gathering? Other countries decide that Vakato prepare and Vakaita Maribu side, but we are just seated waiting to board.
Thank you. I'll allow Dr. Masara to respond to the questions directed to him. I know there was something for Honorable Wende, but he will be up here tomorrow. So I will ask that we park that issue and continue. Okay, I'll give him a few minutes to respond once Dr. Masara is done. Dr. Masara.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Fads were here. So basically what he was talking about is what are we doing as a country to leverage on the demographic dividend. So that's the issue of intergenerational planning that we were talking about. I think it's also a cultural issue that we must probably talk about as we go forward in our discussions. Tiri vanhu vanongoda kungoita here pfimbi yegupe kungoti tongoronga zvinhu zvongoti totowana maresources izvozvi totomashandisa izvozvi zvotopera ipapo. So what are we doing if we are to say okay tikuda imwe mari ipapa kufunga kwangu ndekwekuti I hope everyone understands Shona. No. Okay, my apologies. My thinking is, okay, what's the end game? When we finish these dirty discussions, okay, they say, okay, we have agreed to renegotiate the terms. Now we are in a better position. What's next? We want more debt. And then when we get more debt, what are we going to use it for? How is it going to benefit the young people? Because they constitute the majority. The figure that I used there is the conservative figure, 58%. But the other statistics, they go up high, up to 68%. So I used the most conservative figure. But what all that statistics tell us is that the youth constitute the majority. That's the bottom line. They constitute the majority. So what are we doing in terms of intergenerational planning? I think the sentiment that my brother is bringing is that he is saying, as young people, we are worried. We are worried. What are you going to leave for us? I think. So I think it's something that as we come up with a way forward, let's also have an item that specifically talk to issues related to young people. This one, I think it was related to Honorable, so I will skip that. The issue of performance contracts. So in economics, we talk about what is called an incentive structure. So in short, how do you reward or punish? Because that has an influence, it has a bearing on performance. It has a bearing on performance. What is the carrot, the reward for good performance? Vacho vakaita zvakanaka vachapiwe apart from those who did well. What are they going to get apart from just, okay, they had clean audits? Is there incentive towards that? What is the carrot? There must also be equally, if an incentive structure is properly designed, there must also be a stick towards bad performance. I think as a teacher, that's what we also try to do in school. If you do well, we put stars, good, very good, excellent, you know, it's an incentive. But if you don't submit your homework, so yes, how sure are we that the victims of this El Nino will get the help? I think this is a question that I will put back to the floor. Let me rest my case. Thank
you. With the indulgence of the creators of the program, I've been allowed to change the program a little bit. So if you've had a look at the final program, we had some thematic sessions. We will not be going forward with those this afternoon. We have one more presentation left. But before I introduce our final presenters, I'm going to give an opportunity to Honorable Chibua and Honorable Wendy to respond to some of the issues that came up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, let me respond on the issue of the budget, especially the fears that we are likely going to borrow because of the El Nino, the drought-induced El Nino. We had a meeting with the Honorable Minister of Finance, and our main worry as the Committee on Budget and Finance was how the government was going to respond to the drought, especially looking at our projections, because in the 2024 national budget we had said we were going to stick to our budget deficit of 1.5% of GDP. So the assurance that we got from the Honorable Minister was we had budgeted for El Nino. But it's only that we did not budget for the severity of the drought. Initially, I think in terms of the projections, it was around a loss in output of around 30 to 40%. But then it went up to 71%. So now what is needed on the part of the government is to cover for the other gap. So the explanation that we got is we are going to make use of the unallocated reserve, which is called the back pocket. So when the minister is budgeting, there's an allocated reserve, which is not allocated to all the ministries, where in the case of emergencies, he can make use of that. Then he also mentioned to us that there is going to be some movement of figures, variaments, reallocations. But in terms of what has been done, the midterm budget was done, and we are going to debate that on the 3rd of September. I think any clarity on how those reallocations were done, I think we are going to get it from there. As government, we also had the Africa Risk Capacity payout of around 32 million US dollars because we had insured against the drought, and we got a payment from African Union. So I think these are some of the areas, but we don't expect the government to borrow. But at the best, what they should do is just to reallocate the expenditures and allocation that were done to ministries to cover for the El Nino-induced drought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to, I think at the time when the Auditor General completed the 2023 report, I think the statistics were that bad. But I think some have already complied because this is an ongoing work that will be happening. So I'm sure if you get an updated report from the Auditor General, you will see that the situation has improved a bit. But it's still worrisome. But what we have done as a committee ourselves is that because of the backlog, we made a decision to write to each and everyone that was cited in the report that had the recommendations that they were supposed to implement. And he gave them time to respond to Parliament, explaining what they've done in terms of implementing the Auditor General's report. It's the first time that we've done that. So we wrote letters to everyone. So during the break, I think most of them were busy responding. So when we start parliamentary work on the 3rd, one of the issues that will be seized with is going through those responses and ensuring that everyone that has a recommendation that they were supposed to implement is implemented. But the biggest challenge, like you rightfully said, is that we need the Auditor General to have teeth. Because currently Havana, unfortunately. And I think you saw Pawakabudisa that 2023 report. We had a disturbing comment from the minister, from the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance. You don't do that because you are undermining the office that is performing a constitutional responsibility. Because they report to your ministry, and instead of allowing Parliament to go through the report, the permanent secretary is already commenting. So, but as a committee, what we have done is we have resolved that we are also going to call him so that he explains and in future allows, once an audit has already been performed, the executive must then allow Parliament to go through, do our oversight without any interference. And I think together with my colleagues from the budget, we have made some recommendations for the Public Finance Management Act to be amended. There are discussions that are taking place, and some of the recommendations anoda kuti tiwedzere mazino both kuna Auditor General and also Parliament itself, so that we can have more teeth and etc. But the other thing that we have done also is that all the accounting officers are now signing my performance contract with the office of the president. And one of the recommendations that we are making when we deal with a report of a particular entity that has one failed to audit their accounts or failed to implement the Auditor General recommendation, we resolved that we should recommend that such kind of accounting officers must not, because every year they are signing performance contract, being given another contract, but most of them can't even audit or ensure that their books are audited. So there's that the discussion and resolution in the committee to ensure that we penalize them at that particular point. So those are some of the things that we are doing as a committee. But you are right, to deal with issues of 2021, it's very frustrating even for the committee. And if you see an Auditor General's report written 2023, it doesn't even actually mean that they have audited 2022. Because if you have not submitted yours in 2016, if by the time that the Auditor General is doing the 2022 report, yours is not. So you might have a 2023, but many entities are recorded because so it's a cause of concern, because Basaracho, we are auditing, it's just academic, because even the recommendation at 2021 is about 2024. You know, so those are some of the challenges that we are having. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. We have a couple of comments from our online participants. Michael Zuze says devolution funds are being mismanaged or diverted from their intended purposes by many local authorities. Parliament should take a proactive approach, conduct follow-ups with the relevant authorities to assess the extent to which the Auditor General's recommendations are being implemented. Thank you very much for your contribution, Michael. Tinashe, if you can hear me, can you kindly type your question in the chat box, and we'll be sure to address it in the next plenary session. Without further ado, and before I introduce our next speaker, I'd like to offer a supplementary public apology to him. We did eat into his time, so apologies for that, Mr. Gumbo. But I want to call upon Mr. Gumbo, the Director of the Parliament Budget Office, who will be giving us a presentation on the Parliament of Zimbabwe as a hallmark for promoting transparency and accountability in public debt management. A round of applause, please, for Mr. Gumbo.
No. Thank you very much. If people were wondering what you were whispering to me, I was just saying I'm comfortable with the doctor. So, yeah. The beauty of presenting after lunch and after others have already presented is that some will be listening and some will be following with the eyes open. But I pray that those who will be listening with eyes closed be as low as less than 5%. So I'll be taking you through Parliament of Zimbabwe as a hallmark for promoting transparency and accountability in public debt management. So we are talking about transparency and what? Accountability. Transparency meaning that something is visible to everyone, isn't? And accountability meaning that the executive justifies certain actions. So, yes, Parliament has the responsibility of oversight to ensure that public debt management is conducted in a manner which respects the legislation. So, the reason why is to promote sustainability of debt. I'm sure people are talking about sustainability. When people talk about the percentage of debt to GDP, they are worried about whether we're sustainable or not. So, that sustainability is dependent on the ability to enforce accountability and also demanding transparency. So the role of Parliament then is to perform oversight. The oversight role, there are certain objectives why debt should be looked at from an independent perspective, because there is worry about the cost. So when now we are incurring penalties, it means the costs have been amplified. What we initially agreed with the creditor, if we were paying on time, is no longer what is obtaining. People are worried about the purpose. Why social protection, social services are not funded from debt. Ideally, from an economic perspective, the debt should be incurred for purposes of investment that can generate future benefits to the population. So if you borrow for infrastructure development, the youth should not be worried about the burden, because they will still use that Mbuzi roundabout, they will still use that clinic, they will still use the power plant. So if we borrow for social protection to feed the people, we eat and it's gone. So Parliament is worried about the purpose. That's why you find the public debt management section, is it section 12? It says purpose. Parliament has to enforce that. The reason also is to ensure that debt is sustainable. If even at the household level, sometimes when you see that your income is half of what you owe, it means you can't breathe. So as a nation, we should be in a position to breathe. So the role of Parliament is to ensure that we can breathe. Again, to ensure that the debt position does not compromise economic stability. So stability there, I'm saying economic stability, but sometimes there will be some social also if it goes haywire, when government cannot provide certain key services. So to ensure also that there is transparency, that all borrowing is visible to everyone, all payments are visible to everyone, where we are, it's visible to everyone, people know the purpose why we are borrowing. And also to ensure that there are appropriate strategies to manage the debt, like what the Treasury is presented to say. Our strategy is to negotiate with the creditors. We have a structured, that's a strategy to deal with the areas. So Parliament, they do oversight the members to make sure that the committees here present, they do oversight to make sure that debt is also in line with these objectives. So oversight cannot just happen without a legislative framework. You need to check whether the executive is following the law or they are behaving in a manner which is different with the law. So the law actually provides that public borrowing and all transactions involving national debt must, I understand there's a difference between must and may, must be carried out transparently. Again, Section 300 of the Constitution, which provides for limits on state borrowing, it says that an act of parliament must set limits on borrowing, on the public debt, and also debt and obligations whose payments or repayments is guaranteed by the state. So the guarantees they really present a huge fiscal risk, and the risk of exceeding the 70% if not carefully managed. Because you can operate within the 70%, not knowing that one of the state parastatals or local authority will default. So when that happens, sometimes you just jump to a certain ratio, which is not desirable. So, again, the limits cannot be exceeded without the authority of the National Assembly. Next slide. Again, still on constitutional provisions. I think the first part speaks to accountability. Then this part, which says that within 60 days after government has concluded the loan agreement, minister must cause its terms to be published. Here we are talking about transparency. Which loan did we have? Which one did we conclude? You gazette. So the parliament has to ensure that within those days, people know when it's gazetted, it means everyone has access to it, isn't it? So, again, in terms of the reporting requirements, twice a year, a minister has to report to parliament as far as performance of the loans is concerned, also those that are guaranteed. Next slide. So, now positioning parliament. We have talked about the constitutional provisions, but you notice that the constitution was saying an act of parliament must. An act of parliament must. And that act of parliament is the Public Debt Management Act. This one has the provisions that enforces debt transparency and accountability. Move. So, what provisions are there? What do they talk about? So, the Debt Management Act provides for limits on borrowing. If you go to Section 11, it provides for regular reporting on debt. If you go to Section 36, Section 37 also provides for audit of debt. So, all these, this is the Section 11, which speaks to the limit on borrowing. So what it says is what this section says is that minister can borrow as long as the ratio is within 70%. But to exceed that 70%, the minister must obtain a resolution from the National Assembly to do so. But also under certain conditions, that is, there is a natural disaster, like a cyclone, and also a condition that there is a large investment project in the public sector, which is deemed by cabinet to be timely and prudent. Yes, we also, it also talks about the general economic slowdown, stimulating the economy. You know what happened during the financial crisis? There was a lot of money pumped in by the US and the to make sure that there's blood in the economy. Money is the blood for the economy. If the blood is in short supply, then you hear those people saying, can we have blood from some other people so that we put into this person? So money is the blood. So when the body is starved of that blood, it cannot function properly. Next slide. So, what this provision is saying is that exceeding the 70% mark can only happen under those conditions. So I just pose a question there to say, could this be a loose loop in the legislation? But wherever the executive exceeds the threshold, Parliament always demand convincing explanations. So that's where you see the executive being called, being asked, why do you do this without our approval? What was the good reason for exceeding the limit? Because there's a boundary line which you should not exceed. Next slide. Okay. So, in terms of regular reporting on debt, actually the Public Debt Management Act provides that the executive must report to Parliament. The Constitution is saying twice a year, also consistent with the Public Debt Management Act, that Parliament need to know on behalf of the people the status of the public debt, the specificities of the outstanding loan, the interest rates, and repayment schedules and guarantees. So when there is no reporting, there is nothing for Parliament to actually look at and say and demand explanation. But when there is reporting, like we have the report which was submitted during the presentation of the midterm fiscal policy review statement, which Honorable Chidwa was saying, I have a certain number from the report, and this other number. So this is the point, that this is where they come in and say, can we understand these numbers? So reporting, this has been happening, and the proof is here. You got the reports that were submitted. Next slide. So, well, this is just an extract of the respective provision, which speaks to the requirement for reporting. It speaks to aspects of the debt management strategy. How are we going to deal with arrears? How are we going to manage the debt? How are we going to, if there are token payments, how are you managing? It also should speak to a list of all guarantees issued by the government and their probability of occurring. Probability of that the borrowing institution will default. That will help to anticipate debt levels. If you know that the city of Harare is borrowed, they are struggling to fund even their operations, you should be ready to anticipate an increase in your, whenever the amounts are due. Also providing a list of outstanding borrowings, so including classifications of loans. Is it a public entity? Is it local authority? And the like. Next slide. So, Section 8 of the Public Debt Management Act requires that a medium-term debt management strategy be implemented, be formulated, stating how government will achieve its debt objectives. So, if that strategy is poorly designed, then it undermines debt sustainability. So, Parliament here is to review and assess, like what they were doing, looking at the structured dialogue, the reforms that are required to assess if this. Honorable Chidwa mentioned the 2010 strategy. He also mentioned the Lima, and also the attempt was to reflect on this new strategy to assess its suitability and the ability to achieve the objectives that it is intended to achieve. Again, the debt management strategy should be regularly updated, because there are certain things that changes with time, like your external debt to domestic debt ratio. It changes over time. Short-term and long-term. Short-term debt, we're talking of maturity. If you are at 67% now, and you have a lot of short-term debt which will be maturing very soon, you cannot be very comfortable with that ratio. So this is what Parliament looks at and say, are we still okay? Foreign currency denominated debt as well. This one, when the exchange rate moves, when your currency depreciates, it means you need to fork more to pay for your external debt. So the ratio of forex denominated is also a point of interest for Parliament. So this scrutiny helps Parliament to contribute to improve also the choices of borrowing. Next slide. I think this I've talked to. Next. Okay. Parliament, I talked about the gazetting of loans within 60 days. And some people were asking, what is the purpose for which we are borrowing? And the like. If it's gazetted, it will show you the purpose. If you are not following, you think that these things are not there. So, she mentioned that if you go through the report, you will see what this has been gazetted. And when this happens, then Parliament will rest. If not, they will say, the expectations that you should be gazetting this so that people know. We brought this for this purpose. So I think this will answer some of I was hearing people saying, why are we borrowing for which purpose and that? And these things are there. Only that they are hidden in books. Ratification. Next slide. Ratification. Parliament will ratify external loans, meaning that whenever incurred, then comes for ratification by Parliament. This is what has happened. But recently, we also ratified to expand to other provinces that are not covered there. So, because there is a legislative provision for ratification, Section 327, subsection 3 of the Constitution requires that Parliament ratifies all external loans and guarantees, which impose fiscal obligation on Zimbabwe. So this is what Parliament is doing to make sure that debt management respects what? The law. Next slide. So, Parliament is also appraised. We are talking of transparency. The Minister has indicated that there's a kind of showing commitment to the engagement and engagement process. We are paying. So because the law requires the Minister to report on payments, repayments and everything. They are paying 1 million to one bank, they are paying 500 to ATB, European Investment Bank, the Paris Club, their payments which are being made. And also, Parliament has been appraised on the strategy that we were talking about. What is the strategy? As a country, we have this areas. What is the strategy? So the strategy is, you cannot just design a strategy. You cannot just design a strategy on your own, leaving the other part. Someone asked to say, what are you going to come up with? Because we don't have the creditors yet. So the strategy should include the creditors. So this is what they are doing, engaging the creditors so that there is an agreement. Next slide. Next slide. Right. So the Public Debt Management Act is closely linked to the Public Finance Management Act. They actually complement each other. Why? Because the Public Finance Management Act provides for submission of estimates of revenue, expenditure, and the financing requirements of government by the Minister. That's Section 28 of the Public Finance Act. Section 33 now. So when that happens, Parliament scrutinizes the fiscal framework. If you heard Honorable Chua here, you were saying, I'm worried about the 6.5% deficit. I'm hearing it for the first time, we approved the 1.5. Why is he worried about that deficit going that far? Because it deals to the debt stock. So to guard that, expenditure should be within the approved framework. So they need to make sure that the fiscal framework is adhered to. So to do that, also tracking of the budget on a quarterly basis. Section 33 of the Public Finance Management Act requires that ministries report on budget execution. The planned budget vis-a-vis what they've done. The approved budget, the disbursement, is there disbursement? If not, they have to approach the ministry and say, why are you not disbursing? If there's a disbursement and there's no utilization, then they approach the ministry, expect the ministry and say, why there is no utilization? If there's a budget overrun, then that one is a serious offense because of the implication on debt. Next one. So, yes, here I'm just talking about the fiscal framework which I made reference to. This one in red. If the deficit, then it's triggered borrowing. Adding to what? So what Parliament is doing is trying to guard against growing bigger. The deficit. That's why budget scrutiny is the public debt management in this one set. Next slide. So, yes, just explaining that the deficit requires financing, which adds to what? To the debt stock. So, the SADC benchmark is a deficit of 3% of GDP, but in Zimbabwe, we're working with the 1.5%. So, when that is exceeded, you will notice that the chairperson will not rest. Also, to note that the debt payments are a charge on the budget. which may affect what goes to other critical votes. So there's an opportunity also for paying, servicing your debt. If you do service your debt, sometimes you compromise the vote for education, for instance. Next slide. Okay, I've explained this. Oh, wait a moment. Wait a moment. That's what I'm talking about. There's this other animal here. Accumulation of areas. So if you keep accumulating areas, you are getting services, you are not paying for the services. After 90 days, what will happen? They add to debt. So that one is an important aspect. The ministry is submitting reports and there is expenditure overruns. Then the portfolio committees will call the ministry and whip it in law so that debt is managed. Next slide. So this is the accumulation of arrears. The statistics provided. And look at the movement 2022 and 2023. This is in the public domain. The reports are there online. They are also hard copies. So, if you don't pay service providers, domestic debt. Next slide. Public accounts scrutiny. We're talking about budget scrutiny. Now we are talking about public accounts scrutiny. This is the Auditor General's report, which is analyzed, scrutinized too, with the intention of correcting anomalies in public finance management. So, the scrutiny covers central government, it also covers parastatals, it also covers local authority. Next slide. So, the Auditor General is supposed to audit debt, the debt office. Section 37 of the Debt Public Debt Management Act. But the audit reports on debt, they are not current. What Honorable Wende was saying is to say, if the report is not current, even if we try to correct something which is in the era of 2021 now, sometimes it's no longer important. So this Auditor General should produce current reports on the audit of the debt office. The Public Accounts Committee also looks at the local authority and parastatals. These ones, to ensure that there is prudent financial management system that facilitates fiscal sustainability. If they are not sustainable, one thing is the recourse to the government to guarantee a loan or for government support. You hear this government saying, we are assisting City of Warare because we see that there are issues. So, if there is a prudent financial management, then there won't be that need for government to intervene because the City of Harare is like a government. They collect revenue and spend. They should do that prudently. So the Public Accounts Committee ensures, scrutinizes these Auditor General's reports to make sure that there is prudent financial management. And also to limit the possibilities of those institutions defaulting on guarantees. Because whenever they default on it becomes okay. So basically, next slide, my friend. I exhausted my time, so I'm now borrowing time. Okay, so in conclusion, I can say that the Constitution and the Public Information Act, they provide the key legislative frameworks that are required by Parliament to effectively oversee public debt management through transparent and straight oversight processes. Parliament can ensure that public debt is managed responsibly, sustainably, and in the process safeguarding national policy. I thank you.
Not to run away, as we are going to have a plenary session. Can you kindly check if there are any questions or online comments? Thank you for your insightful presentation. I think it's clear that transparency and accountability are not just ideals, but are essential pillars in fostering trust. And Parliament plays a crucial role in doing this as our representatives. Okay, so we have an online question which I will read out first while I let the participants in the rooms chew on the questions they'd like to ask you. Our online question reads, how best can you help local authorities, especially rural district council, to produce their financial statements on time? Because from what I understand, they must consolidate their financial statements, including audited financial statements for school. They are also facing challenges in terms of cost associated with the They're also facing challenges in terms of cost associated with the They're also facing challenges in terms of cost associated with the auditing of their schools. For example, Gokwe Rural District Council is entitled to more than 200 schools and clinics. So how best can you help them? Because financially, they cannot service these schools and clinics. Thank you very much for your question, Tinashe. I will now take questions from the floor in groups of 3. So I'll take the first round, which is 3 questions. Then I will allow Mr. Kumbu to respond, and we can go into the next round of questions. I see 2 hands up so far, 3 hands. Okay, thank you. I'll take the first 3 that I saw. We'll start in the back there, over to Yolanda, and then next to you. Thank you.
Okay, my question was on the mechanism that the Parliament utilizes in terms of following up, okay, with the law, but is it being utilized for the purposes it was applied for? Then on the issue of transparency, I would like to believe that it is being a little bit theoretical, because most of this content is said to be online, and we do know that the refugees, especially with the majority of the Zimbabweans, the internet is something that is maybe banned or just because of the Zoom meeting, but mostly on WhatsApp. But or maybe we will use other common and cheaper modes of what disseminating this information to the people. Maybe take some slots on the radio. Because telling us that, you know what, this one is on the website, because if everybody has the information, they are empowered. Because I'm sure if some of our honorables in the parliament know how much it's not for the debt crisis, the debt overnight, are we close to it? I'm sure some of us or them will not have been complaining and mention some reviews on the car allowance saying, guys, we are already in debt, we can't afford this much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. When you talk on your slide where you were about the limits to borrowing, you posed a question, and I was wondering on that to say if I'm going to take that question that is posed to the House, and I build on Section 300, it reads the minister shall have so authority to borrow money on behalf of the government by concluding agreements, etc., etc. I'm not going to read the whole part. But if I take your question and I take this portion and pause, maybe my question then becomes to say, when we're then looking at 300 Section 3, has it ever happened that, is it happening next time? To say he can borrow, and then is he coming religiously after 60 days to say, I have borrowed this much? Or, because the minister here has an open check, he can borrow. If we're taking from what you proposed, and we're taking from here that this is the sole decision that he's making, then the question becomes, is he coming back to say, guys, I've borrowed so much from your people?
Okay, what is the question?
Is he coming back to say, I've borrowed? Has it happened within the 60 days?
I got it because you were telling us, so I put it.
Yeah, I was putting context to it,
okay,
building on what you had posted on your slide.
Okay, next question, please.
Okay, thank you.
during the course of the day, I've heard the wonderful work from Civil Treasury, and I also heard about the wonderful work that Parliament is doing. But from the presentation that was done by Dr. Pascal, it shows that everything is not okay. So I just wanted to ask, where are we going wrong as a country? Because what is on the paper and what is happening on the ground, I think there is a big mismatch. So I think maybe from Parliament, since we have the oversight, or maybe we can just give us an overview of where you think we are going from as a country. Because obviously, we seem to be doing it.
Okay, thank you. What mechanism Parliament is using to monitor debt? So, in terms of Parliament tools of monitoring, to say this debt it's for the Mbuzi in the section, for instance. We get reports, quarterly reports from the ministry that is responsible for that, which is the Ministry of Transport. This is the disbursement, this is how the money is used. But Parliament does not end there. Because some of these reports, they will say that the project is 100% complete except for 100% complete, but except for what? Other things which requires a budget of $500,000. So, Parliament, they do what they call field visits. You say that this money was for this project. You want to see. That's why if you go to the Parliament website, you will see pictures of honorable members wanting to see. They want to see. Yes, you can be called for oral hearing. What have you done? We have done this and this and this and this. But they want to see. So if you see them out there, they will be seeing. So, in terms of the dissemination of debt information, what I was explaining here is that the minister should report to Parliament. That's what the Constitution says, isn't it? Twice a what? A year. And by reporting to Parliament, we are saying, because these are members representing the people. So when he is presented to Parliament, he is presented to the people through representative democracy. Not everyone of that constituency can come to Parliament, but they have a representation. So that representation, when they get information, is information not disseminated. But I'm not saying Minister of Finance should shy away from using WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, and their website, and even printing hard copies. No. I'm just saying, what the law says is that they should be reporting to Parliament. And that reporting is happening. So, other means of disseminating the Minister of Finance's hearing, you can make your submissions. Those that suit you, if you want WhatsApp, the ministry is here. Limits on borrowing, the minister is so authority to borrow and open check. So, what the law says now is that the minister has the responsibility to borrow. And what section 11 is saying is that he can borrow as long as it's below 70% without seeking for Parliament approval. But whenever he wants to borrow to exceed that limit, he must seek Parliament approval. And that borrowing should be addressing a natural what? Either a natural disaster or investing in a public investment project which cabinet deemed timely and prudent. Or for what reason again? There are three reasons. So if those things are not met, then the minister does not have a free check, an open check to go up. That's what the law says. And what that Parliament has to make sure that the law is what? Observed. If people want other things different from what the law says, then there should be motion to change the act. Okay. Where is the country going getting wrong? For me to respond, hands down.
Okay, I'm going to take the last round of questions. I'm going to take the last round of questions. I see 4 hands. Do you want to respond to the question about the country? Honorable Minister. Okay, I'll allow him to ask his question. Okay, I'm going to take the last round of questions based on the 4 hands that I see. We'll start in front here with Honorable Chidua. Then we'll go over to that side of the room. Mike, I'll give you an opportunity to ask a question. Tafadzwa and Tatenda, and then Mufaro in that order. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if Mike is a person, but I think I just need some clarity. There is an issue that Petronella Mavunga brought up, but I decided to pack it. You also brought it up. The issue of the 3.5 billion compensation to former farm owners. Yeah, when the compensation process started, I was part of the process. And I remember quite a number of farmers refused to sign the global compensation deed. There was no agreement between the farmers and the government on the 3.5 billion. And now we're using the 3.5 billion as the official figure. But many farmers are not part of this. They refused to sign. So I'm not sure if the 3.5 billion figure is now final, because this is going to give us confusion in the future. Maybe we capitulate in the future and then the figure all of a sudden becomes 4.5 billion. Is this the final figure? Because I'm very sure quite a number of farmers are not party to this. They refused to sign.
Thank you for the question. Mike, you could go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is directed to the doctor who spoke for the gentleman who spoke about the
doctor is fine.
Okay. Yeah, but the big picture about, or the picture about Zimbabwe. I just find it a bit oxymoronic, the use of devolution funds. Because devolution is devolution, it could find something wrong. And because I've been hearing that the funds cannot be used for other things besides what they are meant to be used for the government. And that's what devolution. For me, I think local government must be able to decide what to do with those funds, because devolution is a power to make decisions. But when you say devolution of funds, I think for me something will make sense. I want to be corrected that maybe I am less educated, but I think you should think about what you mean by devolution funds, because it doesn't make sense for you to say, here is money for Kadama City Council, but you can only buy tractors. But it's devolution fund. What is devolution? What do you mean by devolution? So I think this is a challenge to the MPs here when they go to Parliament to think about what it means by devolution. Because if you look at the Constitution and chapter 14, it's clear how it defines devolution, where people are in charge of their resources. They couldn't make decisions about their local level resources. even if they come from government, they should be given a basket and then decide to say, what do we do with those funds as a local government? What are the specific things that we need to do?
Thank you very much. Tafazwa, you can go ahead.
If I find out Jim and the parliamentarian, what are you doing in terms of addressing the issue around wastage? Because wastage is not necessarily theft all the time. But, for example, we then see in the Auditor General's reports issues around fuel allocations, very ridiculous amounts, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 liters, that are due to some leaders or people running institutions that are running losses and that are wasting. But then hear that this is part of their contract. In terms of then analyzing and making sure that these things are reasonable, what are the members of parliament and yourselves doing around that? Because for then hear issues, rumors around that maybe fuel is being calculated, their allocation is to 1 liter of fuel only takes them for 3, 4, 5 kilometers, which is not reasonable. Even if a car is very wasteful, you should get at least 7, 8, 9 kilometers of a liter of fuel. But that is not some of the things that are producing the wastage in some of the institutions that you are overseeing. What are you doing in terms of analyzing the contracts and making sure that we then at least reduce the wastage that is clearly there?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Abumo, for the presentation. You will help to begin now with the government. My two comments are, number one, you mentioned that if you don't pay service providers, be prepared for domestic debt rise. It appeared your analysis was also signed on other factors which gives rise to domestic debt, like consulted debt on non-made-up issues such as executive debts. I don't know whether that was the legal information. Then the second one is the refugee assistance honorable Wende and colleagues. Did Minister Antuni ever appear before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee under the inconsistencies and issues raised to do with cabinet against management? For example, the level cost $9,000. And if he did not appear, was there a sticker for that young investor? And if there was no sticker, can we still talk of Parliament as a hallmark for promoting transparency and accountability?
Thank you. And the last question before I go ahead.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Thank you. So, the existing legislation in terms of the Public Debt Management Act requires parliamentary approval to be given after those loans and guarantees have been concluded. So my question is that, is there a procedure by which Parliament rejects, ratifies those loans and guarantees? A statutory procedure by which Parliament guarantees, rejects or ratifies those loans. I ask on the background of the High Court order, which was given by the Minister of Finance, where Zimbabwe was the applicant. I feel like this procedure would be useful to lay down a statutory amendment by which Parliament has to approve loans before government. I think this procedure will cover such things as consultations between the Ministry of Finance and the Parliamentary Committee on Public Accounts. Finally, because we've seen Parliament being blindsided sometimes when.
Okay, he says, please can you ask the question? What exactly is the question? Maybe summarize it in one sentence.
Okay. The question is there a procedure by which Parliament ratifies and rejects laws and guarantees before they are approved by the government?
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Mr. Kombo. I'll give you 3 minutes to summarize your
question. How many loans have been ever rejected by Parliament?
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. So, compensation to whom? The 3.5 I think the minister better place to clarify. Okay, so I need that. What is devolution? So devolution is a broader term, which means that power and authority to make decisions is granted, but that power is also accompanied with some financial resources, so that the local authority, the community there decides their biggest challenge in that community. If it's water, they put water reservoirs. If it's a school, they decide to put a school because it's in that locality. If they feel that they are being attacked by animals, they can just choose to put a boundary fence with electricity and say, we have this money, we are being, our children are being killed by elephants. Let's try to protect ourselves. So you are given the authority, but this money they call it intergovernmental transfer. They don't call it devolution. Others they call it devolution, but devolution is more than money. I think dealing with the wastage. You know, some of these questions, the value for money issues. So, some of these issues which happen behind the scenes, when your accounting officers are called to Parliament, one thing I've noticed is that these accounting officers, they don't like these summons. And when it's summoned, people start shivering. Even the Auditor General was called to pack, to account on how they were spending money. And she was behaving like she's not the Auditor General. Because the chair was questioning her without what? Fear or favor. So when these things happen, because these quarterly reports which I mentioned, they tell a story. And if you are not telling a true story, it will be also revealed that this is not a true story. So the quarterly report is not just a financial report. It speaks to what you have done with the resources. And if what you have delivered does not match what you have spent, the value for money, then you will be crucified by the committee. So this is what happens behind the scenes. Obviously, because they call the accounting office, sometimes the other people may continue to spoil the accounting office. So, generally, this is what happens. If honorable members here, the chairpersons can also explain that this is what they do, because we are there to assist them doing it. So they do it. I mentioned the accumulation of arrears. Yes, because I was talking about the scrutiny of the budget and tracking of the budget. To say, if ministries are incurring expenditure overruns, they are spending more than what was approved by Parliament, then it means our debt is what? Is growing. So they want to put a check on that. It does not mean that they are shy on assessing value for money issues. No. These are issues that are always checked. Minister Mtuli, he appeared before Parliament several times. One time he was asked to say, how are we going to do with the drought? So he started talking, he mentioned that with the provision but we did not anticipate the severity of the drought. That was the minister. He was called for hearing. What is his plan? Then he said we are going to pyramid. We also have private players. We also have donor agencies. They are assisting in the process. We have no intention to borrow. Then the committee was given comfort that this drought will not result in borrowing. It was not something which happened online. He was in parliament. So, this is just a case in point that I'm highlighting. But it's there several times. So it's procedure, but when you say this case is before the court, the procedure, I will shy away from responding to it. I cannot comment on issues that are before the court. So I submit.
Thank you very much. I think we have an addition from Honorable Wendy. I'll allow you just 1 minute, Honorable.
30 seconds. This issue of before the courts, I think it's one of the biggest challenges that we face with the people that want to evade scrutiny. Because the easiest thing is if you know that the Auditor General has cited you, is you just quickly go and make a High Court application. Then when you are called, you start stating these kind of issues. But in public accounts, we have found a way of sidestepping that. We will call you, and you will come and cite your issue before the court, but you will come. Because the constitution is very clear, and I know there's a huge debate going forward. Because if we allow these people to do that, no one is going to appear before the committee. So I just wanted to state that it's a problem that we have, but we, as members of parliament, we are always creative to ensure that everyone comes. The constitution is very clear. The only person that we can summon is the president. But Munwese, Minister Mtuli, vamwanonetsa zvavo vanombodrega like ivava, but vanouya seuzvamanzwa, and we drag them to come. And the issue yemakombiyuta yanga ichitaurwa iyai, it's one of our success stories, because we had a very a strange situation. Yekuti imimi parliament, you are the ones who are responsible for oversight. Then parliament yacho muri kutenga makombiyuta 9,000. Ende vanhu vacho vakatarisira kuti muchengete mari dzavo vari kutoona kuti imimi munenge musiri kuzifambisa zvakaita sei zvakanaka. So kana tichita basa redu, we called them parliament, because as public accounts, what we have decided was, for the first time, the Auditor General was never scrutinized, because her report is not part of her report. So there was no avenue to ask her to account, but she's also using public funds. So we said this year, before we start with everyone, because we want to put confidence in the market and in the citizens, you must come. No, maybe in camera, what, ndikati aiwa uyai nema journalists vanhu vese tikaona muine zvamusina kuitawo izvozvo tokuudzai munogadzisa munhu wese achinzwa, so that even the smaller entities that you audit, they know that there's no one who escapes scrutiny. So vakauya, luckily they had a clean report, and they are also going to come again. Satatanga 2023, we start with the Auditor General, then we call Parliament. If Parliament is scheduled to come also, then topinda ku ministry tozotaka kudzika manje kupi kwese, so that everyone else is covered. So you can be rest assured that as Parliament apana nochedza ipapa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me just add on devolution. Pane vabvunza nezve devolution. Government iri kusenzesa inonzi program based budgeting. Haupuwi mari kana usina program. So what is supposed to come first is your programs. So devolution, my powers, I could decide how to use my resources. No, it was devolved to the local authorities, making use of the stakeholders variko through my ward assembly. They then decide to Mariabo for which programs. These are the programs that are then submitted to the government. And whenever you request for funds, what is important is to make sure that there is a program first and the funds are released against a program. Hamutangi mapuwa mari mozondo decide kuti mari itoisenza chi. So this is how devolution funds are devolved. And in terms of allocations, there's a specific formula that is there. In it, taking into account my inequalities are equal, nokuti my regions in terms of infrastructure development, ndewape wakasarira. This is how the funds are allocated. But what is worrying for us as Parliament is devolution is a constitutional provision. There is supposed to be an allocation of at least 5% of my resources are they are supposed to be allocated towards devolution. But the worrying part is on disbursements. But disbursements it requires less than 1%. So devolution iripo just as a name. But otherwise, even as we debate next week, but one, we need to bring this to the attention of the Honorable Minister that a constitutional provision, 5%, we want the full 5%, not just in allocation, but in disbursements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me also give Ms. Mavinga to respond on the 3.5 billion white farmers refusing to agree or agree.
Thank you. On the 3.5 global compensation deed, that is a full and final compensation for farm improvements. The global compensation deed was co-signed by His Excellency the President and together with the representative of the former farm owners. What the former farm owners were rejecting is the payment modalities. Initially, government offered to pay through treasury bonds ranging with maturities ranging from 1 to 20 years. Then farmers were saying some of us are very old, some already died. So can you move the maturities to a shorter term? And then on negotiations, we agreed and we settled on treasury bonds ranging 2 to 10 years. And from the around 4,500 farmers, former farm owners, already about 1,300 have indicated their interest to sign to this compensation payment. And we know that once we start payment, they will come on board because it has been 24 years of no payment. So once we start, they will come on board. And this is a full and final compensation. And when a farmer is paid, they sign a consent form with the Ministry of Lands, which states full and final payment. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to add some spice on the issue of the compensation for farm owners. So I'll say this in Shona. I attended a meeting. Some of the meetings on this issue of land. Ukaona nharo dzacho dzinenge dzichita varungu so nenyaya yemunda unongoti ndodawo munda and something is there pamunda wechete chete. Vanenge vachijova zvokuita kunge munda wachoka ndewe kuBritain chaiyo. Which means there's something that is sacred, something that is so valuable around that issue, right? But the discussions around the issue of compensation have been vicious. I remember this other time when there's a Matabeleland farmer who was so vicious, so vicious. We are dying. We began these negotiations when I was 50 years. I am now 74 years. And I am now sick. Somebody who sends up and say, my father was the one that began the negotiations. He's gone. The land was not in the company's name. So it's now in my name, but I cannot inherit. You know. So there are several issues, sticking points around the issue of what? Compensation. But there's been progress. There have been serious meetings. We are getting somewhere. But we need money. We need money. We need money from somewhere. Once we begin, like she has said, more will come. I think some were actually paid before they did, right? And then they said, I will take this amount, and then they were offered, and then they went away. But I like these debates. The executive is here, the parliament is here, is breathing fire, CSOs are here, they are insisting on using the word debt crisis. When Pet wants debt overhang, Adesina like the word debt backpack. Huh? So Adesina says, this debt that we have in Zimbabwe is like a backpack that you are carrying as you are climbing up the hill. Other people have bigger debts, but they have bigger backs. They can climb running, the USA and other countries. But you, Zimbabwe, other countries can climb the hill with some backpacks, but they have support. Other countries are still supporting them. Now we have been isolated for some time. So there's not like the word backpack. I like that word. It's a baggage that we must address going forward. But these were rich conversations. This is good dialogue. We have everyone here. And it's the hallmark of engagement. So let's clap hands for ourselves for that. This is a national issue. This is an issue of national concern. This is a huge topic in national discourse. These are the issues that our politicians should be debating and discussing when they are campaigning kuma province, kuma constituents. Honorable Chido. I will solve the national debt. Oh, my bridge, my bridge name at him. Honorable Chido, Minister Mangwana. But honorable, when you were a minister, when you were an MP, you were so passionate about these issues. Let's address this, let's amend the act. Mazo ita say, mazo jike, you want to go chinja, you want to go farm animals motor. Wow, I have had several friends of mine who I can't even say hello. They shot up the roof. My judges, the judge called Justice Dembure. I can't even say hello Regis. Glosseta means a reader. Shot through the roof because he's now a judge. So it's the time to say, but our minister, when you were an MP, you were against this issue. But I really welcome the remarks also by Honorable Wende. Parliament must not be bogged down by technical issues such as sub judice. This matter is sub judice. Remember, Honorable Wende, I think the last Parliament, or the one before that one, there was a person who was called by Parliament and he came with his lawyer. Who Parliament? The lawyer was a classmate of mine. I think Nyambuya. I think it was Nyambuya something. Hey, the lawyer will speak. Surely you are a CEO. You are the head of this organization. You must come to Parliament to account for your actions. Or my lawyer will speak. Surely can we wait for those things? If I am the president, I will fire you the next day. Because it means you can run away from Parliament, isn't it? There's no oversight. So Parliament must always create innovative approaches to try to remove or ignore or not be bogged down by these technical, obstacles to the exercise of their oversight role. So Parliament, we appreciate your presence. OPC, we are happy you are here. OPC also drafts the National Development Strategy. So when they draft NDS 2 very soon, when is NDS 1 expiring? They have already commenced what? NDS 2 preparations or consultative, right? Frameworks. Where did NDS 1 fail in relation to public debt? How can we plug those? How can we improve so that NDS 2 targets public debt? If you agree with public debt is an issue, and what Petronella did not tell you is that the person who initiated this whole program, areas clearance, is the president himself. It's not anyone. It's the president himself. Minister of Finance got the modalities of how to do it, but it was the president who said, I want to address this issue. Right? And the political commitment by the president, by his excellence, of going all the way to signing a global compensation deed with white commercial farmers. Compared to our history, it shows massive commitment to address domestic debt, isn't it? So we appreciate the presence of the executive. The debates were very frank, constructive, open-ended. Apanata, I'm not authorized to answer that question. Mr. Gumbo was saying some duties and some other things. But no, he did not. He did very well also as Parliament. As Parliament, you are not boggled down by the chains that usually bind the members of the executive. You are not executive, right? Although you are near there. So for now, the tower is under. But we really have done something which we are proud of today. And tomorrow, the spirit must continue. I want to invite Miss Lucia to give us the last remarks for the day. Let's clap hands as she comes forward.
Thank you, Doc. A very good afternoon to you. I will start by giving the chairperson of the Budget Committee advice. Please never follow his route, otherwise you lose the elections. When you are in the constituents, it has nothing to do with your role in Parliament. They've got other expectations. So take his advice with caution. Okay, on a lighter note, I must say I think it has been a great day for all of us. With representatives from government, parliament, civil society organization on a very important conference on the debt. And I think this actually tells us that this is not a government issue, but all of us who have got a role to play. From the presentations in the morning, reflections from the Zimbabwe Church of Councils, Council of Churches of Zimbabwe. Bishop, I think he did a great job to contextualize these issues, to say even in the Bible, we have had issues of debt and their responsibilities. And again, Madame Jo, in her keynote address, she was very clear about the objectives of this conference. We are exchanging some views around the issues of debt. We are giving actually some recommendations. What we expect as civil society, what we expect as Parliament, what we also expect you as civil society organizations. I must say the discussions were so enriching. From the presentation by the Minister of Finance, I am happy it was my first time attending this conference where Minister of Finance is attending. And I must say your presentation was so enriching, Madam. We are now quite aware that our debt is around 20 billion. It's no longer a secret. And we have seen all the strategies which the ministry is pursuing in terms of working around our debt. And from your presentation, we have seen that the most of our debt is actually on the penalties and our arrears. And I'm sure if we continue to work together, we'll be able to come up with strategies which can assist the government in clearing the debt. And as Doc was saying in his final remarks, others, they've got support. And as a country, Zimbabwe, given our history since 2000, we have challenges in terms of external support. And I think we need to do a lot. The president has actually said, so I am saying all of us with a responsibility. From the Kadoma group, the artists, they've said, and let's do things. We are one. You are a Zimbabwean, I'm a Zimbabwean. All of us, we are Zimbabweans. And we've got a role to play. From the presentation by Dr. Pasara, I must say, when we look at that Auditor General's report, they've reported based on the audit which they've conducted. Unless Parliament has pronounced itself on those issues, because the role of the PAC is to examine entities against the findings of the Auditor General. So after PAC has done its work, we expect some clear, in terms of what action has to be taken. You'll be surprised that for some of the issues, maybe the ministries have already taken some action. If you look at that report closely, we will see a section on progress on implementation of prior year recommendations. So it's not final. The issues are not final as we see them in the Auditor General's report. We expect the Public Accounts Committee to invite entities, get the explanation, whether it's wasteful expenditure or they've not done a number of things. Then the PAC will make its recommendation. I must say, in as far as the Auditor General's report, the buck should stop with Parliament, because Auditor General is conducting that audit on behalf of Parliament. So when you see no action in terms of Auditor General, please get in touch with the Honorable Wende, is the chief culprit. Then the presentation by our own Dr. Gumbo. Someone was saying this is a real government. I had some remarks there concerning his presentation. Yeah, we have a benefit in Mr. Gumbo's parliament. He's coming from government, and now in parliament, he's quite aware of what happens the other side and what should be happening in parliament. So I'm sure I've seen that his presentation, at least he was very emphatic in terms of issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, I must say we had a great day. We'll continue again tomorrow. Let's continue to reflect on all those issues and come up with some recommendations. For me, what is important is for us to come up with recommendations which will assist the government and the Ministry of Finance in as far as they are pursuing the issues of debt with a view to become sustainable in terms of our debt levels. I must say thank you for the opportunity. At least I was not advised earlier on that I was going to make these remarks, but all the same, I am happy that I was able to say something. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
So, we have reached the end. Ladies and gentlemen, we can claim again for ourselves. I don't have any additional logistics. We can meet and greet, we can network. But you have to know one. It's also network with the food. Because you also have to know one. Because you have to know one. So there's tea outside, let's have tea.